The meeting room on Polaris Station was quiet, almost ominously so, with a single beam of cold light casting a sharp circle on the metallic table. Commander Elias Trent sat alone, watching the steady crimson pulse of his communicator. His orders from Coalition Command had been simple yet heavy. Don't let this meeting fail. If it does, there will be war. He took a breath, centering himself. There was no time for nerves, no space for hesitation. But as the seconds ticked by, the weight of responsibility pressed down on him, sharper than the silence in the room. The doors slid open with a soft hiss, and Trent turned to watch the two delegations enter, both visibly tense, brimming with unspoken animosity. The Xynari came first, their reptilian forms moving with disciplined precision. Each of their soldiers walked in time, their boots creating a hollow echo that seemed to amplify the sense of impending conflict. Their yellow eyes gleamed, unblinking, as they surveyed the room, assessing potential threats. Trailing them were the Kelarins, a sleek and ethereal race with reflective, violet eyes. They moved with grace, their silver uniforms shimmering under the harsh lighting, but the cold fury in their expressions made it clear they hadn't come in peace. The Kelarin delegation, though outwardly composed, radiated tension, every muscle taut as if ready to snap. Trent cleared his throat, breaking the silence that had settled like a shroud. "Thank you for being here," he began, his voice calm but edged with authority. "We're here for one reason: to stop this before it becomes a war. I don't need to tell you what that would cost your people, your worlds." He paused, letting his words sink in. The faint hum of the station's artificial gravity underscored his speech, a low drone that felt more like a countdown than a comfort. High Representative Nyrex, the Kelarin diplomat, broke the silence, his voice smooth but icy. "The Xynari have tested our patience for too long. Our people demand justice." His violet eyes flickered toward the Xynari delegation, settling on war leader Crix with a gaze sharp enough to cut steel. Crix, a towering Xynari with dark copper scales, sneered in response. His voice was a low growl that rumbled through the room. "Your idea of justice is to humiliate and punish us, Nyrex. We won't apologize for defending our borders." His teeth, sharp and gleaming, were bared in a defiant snarl. Trent raised a hand to halt the brewing argument, his voice steady but unyielding. "We're not here to trade blame. Imagine this instead: walking out of here with your people safe, your honor intact. Think of the legacy that could leave." For a moment, both leaders were silent. Trent noted the flicker of hesitation in Nyrex's eyes and the way Crix's defiance softened, if only slightly. The two were listening, if only barely. Sitting beside Trent, his diplomatic advisor Julian Blake leaned in, speaking in a low whisper. "Nyrex might be willing to listen, but it'll take more than talk. They need something concrete, something symbolic to take back to their people." Lieutenant Leo Mara, an intelligence officer with a deep understanding of both cultures, nodded. "The Kelarins value legacy, and the Xynari, they respect strength and directness. Commander, if we're going to make any headway, we'll need a solution that appeals to both." Trent's mind raced, formulating a plan. He addressed the room with renewed confidence, his voice clear and authoritative. "What if, instead of reparations or concessions, we build something together, a monument on Indraya, a neutral ground dedicated to the fallen of both sides, a place where both Kelarins and Xynari can remember their loss without resentment?" Nyrex's gaze sharpened, his expression unreadable. "A monument for lives lost," he murmured, as if testing the weight of the idea. "A place of reflection, not retaliation." On the other side of the table, Crix's yellow eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "A monument isn't surrender," he said slowly, his voice gruff but tinged with something resembling respect. "It's acknowledgement of sacrifice." The faintest glimmer of understanding flickered between Nyrex and Crix, and Trent allowed himself a moment of cautious optimism. But just as he felt the tension ease, the doors swung open abruptly, and a Kelarin officer hurried over to Nyrex, whispering urgently in his ear. Nyrex's face tightened as he listened, his violet eyes narrowing to slits. "Commander Trent," he said, his voice brittle with restrained fury, "we have received word that Xynari warships are mobilizing near Indraya. Explain that, if you can." Trent's heart sank, and he shot a hard look at Crix. The Xynari warleader's expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of surprise that seemed genuine. Crix's voice was sharp, defensive. "I gave no such orders. Perhaps it is the act of a rogue commander, someone acting without authorization." But Trent wasn't convinced. He could feel the delicate threads of diplomacy beginning to fray, and if he didn't act quickly, this fragile peace would shatter. War Leader Crix, Trent said, his voice steely, you need to get in touch with your fleet. Order them to stand down immediately. This is your chance to prove your commitment to peace. Crix hesitated, his pride warring with logic, but Trent's unyielding gaze held him in check. With a frustrated snarl, Crix barked a series of commands into his communicator, his voice dripping with barely controlled rage. Stand down, he growled. All ships in the Xynari sector are to disengage immediately. For a few agonizing minutes, the room was silent as Crix waited for confirmation. The tension was palpable, a taut string ready to snap. Finally, his communicator crackled with a response, and Crix gave a terse nod to Trent. The fleet has withdrawn, Crix said, his voice begrudging but resolute. We are not here to provoke war. Trent allowed himself a brief moment of relief, but he knew the hardest part was yet to come. The peace accords were far from finalized, and both sides continued to argue over every clause, every line. Trent watched each exchange like a carefully balanced scale, feeling each negotiation tilt them closer to peace or closer to disaster. Hours passed, each one more tense than the last. The flickering lights, the low hum of the station, and the terse voices created an atmosphere so charged that even a single misspoken word could set off an explosion. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last detail was agreed upon. Both delegations leaned back, weary, but cautiously hopeful. Trent took a slow breath, feeling the tension ease, if only slightly. But then the lights dimmed suddenly, and an alarm blared through the station, a low, ominous tone that sent a chill down his spine. His communicator crackled to life a message from Coalition Command. Commander Trent, we've detected a rogue Xynari faction en route to Xynari. They've refused the order to stand down. Estimated time to arrival, 15 minutes. Trent's heart pounded. This rogue faction could destroy everything they'd worked for. He looked at Crix, who seemed genuinely shocked, his expression a mix of anger and horror. Crix, Trent said urgently, if you want peace, you have to act. Can you get through to them? Crix's voice was a low growl, his frustration barely contained. They're renegades, Commander. I don't know if they'll listen, but I'll try. He stepped aside, issuing rapid commands into his communicator, his voice fierce and unyielding. As he argued with the rogue commanders, Trent turned to Xynari, who was watching with a mixture of distrust and impatience. Xynari, I need you to understand, Trent said, his tone pleading but firm. Crix is doing everything he can. But if we can't control this, we'll need to prepare an immediate defensive response. Your fleet needs to stand by, but do not engage unless they attack first. A single misfire could trigger all-out war. Xynari hesitated, but he gave a stiff nod. Understood, Commander. But know this, if a single shot is fired at our people, we will respond with full force. Minutes ticked by, each one an agonizing eternity, as they waited for word from Crix's forces. Finally, Crix lowered his communicator, his expression grim but resolved. They've agreed to stand down, he said, his voice low, his relief tempered by the weight of what could have been. For now, at least. But they're restless. They don't trust this peace. Trent met his gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. Then let's make them believe in it. Let's give them something worth holding on to. The final accords were signed hours later, and as Trent watched both delegations leave, he felt the immense weight finally lift. It wasn't a perfect peace, there were fractures, simmering tensions that would need time and patience to heal. But it was a beginning, a chance for both sides to walk away without the stain of war. As the doors closed, Trent leaned back, feeling exhaustion settle over him like a blanket. He knew the road ahead was long and fraught with challenges, but for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope.